The hot summer sun beat down on Helena Tyler's pale skin. As the stagecoach rumbled to a stop, dust swirling around the wooden wheels like miniature tornadoes in the parched Wyoming earth. The year was 1878, and Helena had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston to take a position as a schoolteacher in the growing frontier town of Whispering Pines. "This is your stop, miss," the driver called down, his weathered face creasing into deep lines as he squinted against the blinding sunlight. "Rattlesnake Ranch, just like you asked." Helena peered out the window, her heart sinking as she took in the dilapidated buildings and empty corrals. This couldn't possibly be right. The advertisement had described a thriving cattle operation with a small community in need of education for their children. What stood before her looked more like an abandoned outpost than a working ranch. "There must be some mistake," she said, gathering her skirts as she carefully descended from the coach. "I was to be delivered to the Morgan Ranch. This isn't right." The driver shrugged, already tossing down her trunk and carpet bag. "Paper says Rattlesnake Ranch, madam. This is it. Next coach won't be through for another 2 weeks." Before Helena could protest further, the driver had climbed back onto his perch, flicked the reins, and sent the stagecoach rolling away in a cloud of dust, leaving her alone with her belongings in the middle of nowhere. Tears of frustration threatened to spill over as she stared at the empty ranch house. After her father's death had left her penniless, this teaching position had been her salvation, her chance to make her own way in the world. Now, it seemed like a cruel joke. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. A rider approached from the distant hills, the silhouette growing clearer as he neared broad shoulders, the distinctive shape of a cowboy hat, and a horse that moved with powerful grace. As he drew closer, Helena could make out more details. A strong, sun-bronzed face with several days' worth of stubble, piercing eyes the color of a summer storm, and clothing worn from honest work. He reined in his horse a few feet away, studying her with undisguised curiosity. "Madam," he greeted, tipping his hat, "you seem a mite lost." "I believe I am," Helena admitted, trying to maintain her composure despite her rising panic. "I was meant to arrive at Morgan Ranch to begin my position as schoolteacher, but the driver insisted this was my destination, Rattlesnake Ranch." A smile tugged at the corner of the cowboy's mouth, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. Morgan Ranch was renamed 3 years ago after a rather unfortunate incident involving the previous owner and a particularly ornery rattlesnake. He swung down from his saddle with fluid grace. "This is indeed the place you're looking for, though we weren't expecting you until next week." "Oh." Helena felt the heat of embarrassment color her cheeks. "Then I've arrived early. I do apologize for the confusion." The cowboy approached, removing his hat to reveal thick, dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "No need for apologies. I'm Griff Xavier, foreman of this outfit." He extended a calloused hand. Helena hesitated only briefly before placing her gloved hand in his. "Helena Tyler. A pleasure to make your acquaintance, Mr. Xavier." His grip was firm but gentle. "Folks around here just call me Griff." His eyes swept over her city clothes and multiple trunks. "You've come a long way, Miss Tyler." "From Boston," she confirmed. "It's been quite the journey." Griff nodded, releasing her hand and gesturing toward the main house. "Well, the place isn't much to look at from out here, I'll grant you that. The main operations are over the ridge. This is just the old homestead where you'll be staying. The schoolhouse is about a 1/4 mile down the road." Helena felt a rush of relief. Perhaps this wasn't a complete disaster after all. "I see. And the children? How many will I be teaching?" 12 at last count, ranging from 5 to 16. Ranch hands kids mostly, plus some from the neighboring properties. He picked up her trunk with surprising ease. "Let me show you to your quarters. You must be exhausted after such a long journey." As they walked toward the house, Helena noticed that what had appeared run down from a distance was actually quite solid upon closer inspection. The wood was weathered but sturdy, the windows clean, and a small garden bloomed with surprising vigor beside the porch. "It's not what you expected," Griff said, his voice low and somehow knowing. "I can see it in your face." Helena straightened her shoulders. "I confess, when I first arrived, I thought I'd been sent to the wrong ranch entirely." Griff paused at the bottom of the porch steps, turning to face her. His eyes held hers for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. "No," he whispered with surprising gentleness. "This is fate." Something in his voice made Helena's heart flutter unexpectedly. She quickly attributed it to fatigue from her long journey, but couldn't help wondering what he meant by such a curious statement. The interior of the house was surprisingly comfortable, simple furnishings, clean floors and windows that let in the golden afternoon light. A woman in her 50s emerged from what appeared to be the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "You must be our new schoolmarm," she said warmly. "I'm Martha Wilson, the cook and housekeeper. We weren't expecting you so soon, but your room is ready nonetheless." "Thank you," Helena said, relieved to find such a friendly face. "I hope my early arrival isn't too much of an inconvenience." "Nonsense," Martha replied. "We're just pleased you're here. The children have been asking about you for weeks." Griff set down Helena's trunk. "I've got to get back to work, but I'll leave you in Martha's capable hands. The ranch owner, Mr. Holloway, will want to meet you at supper." Helena nodded. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Xavier." "Griff," he corrected with a smile that transformed his entire face. "Welcome to Rattlesnake Ranch, Miss Tyler." After he departed, Martha showed Helena to a modest but clean bedroom at the back of the house. "It's not fancy like what you might be used to back east," the older woman apologized, "but it's private and comfortable." "It's perfect," Helena assured her, genuinely pleased with the simple quarters. After spending weeks on crowded trains and stagecoaches, the small room felt like a palace. "Rest up," Martha advised. "Supper's at 6 sharp. The men come in hungry and Mr. Holloway doesn't like to be kept waiting." Left alone, Helena sank onto the narrow bed, her mind whirling with impressions of her new home. Despite the rocky start, she felt a cautious optimism about Rattlesnake Ranch. Particularly intriguing was the foreman with the storm-gray eyes who had spoken of fate in that curious way. Helena changed from her travel-stained clothes into a simple blue dress, one of the few she'd brought that wasn't too formal for ranch life. She washed her face and hands in the basin provided, then carefully pinned her honey-brown hair back into a neat bun. The journey had taken its toll. She was thinner than when she'd left Boston, her freckles more pronounced from days in the sun. At precisely 6 o'clock, Martha rang a bell that echoed through the house. Helena made her way to the dining room, where she found a long table already occupied by several men in various states of cleanliness, all of whom rose when she entered. An older gentleman at the head of the table stepped forward. "Miss Tyler, welcome. I'm Harold Holloway, owner of Rattlesnake Ranch." He was in his early 60s with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. "Please join us." Helena was directed to a seat beside Mr. Holloway, acutely aware of the curious glances from the ranch hands. Griff sat across from her, freshly washed but still in his work clothes, his damp hair combed back from his forehead. "Gentlemen," Mr. Holloway announced, "this is Miss Helena Tyler, our new schoolteacher. I expect you all to show her the respect befitting a lady of education." Murmured greetings went around the table before Mr. Holloway said grace, and the meal began in earnest. The food was simple but plentiful: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from the garden Helena had noticed earlier. "How was your journey, Miss Tyler?" Mr. Holloway inquired as platters were passed. "Long but educational," Helena replied. "I've never traveled west of the Mississippi before." "It's a different world out here," one of the older hands commented. "Takes some getting used to." "I'm eager to learn," Helena said with determination. "Particularly about the community and the children I'll be teaching." "Griff can show you around tomorrow," Mr. Holloway decided. "The schoolhouse needs some attention before classes begin." Griff nodded. "I'd be happy to, sir." The conversation flowed easily after that, with the men discussing cattle, weather, and local gossip. Helena listened attentively, trying to absorb as much as possible about her new home. Occasionally, she would glance up to find Griff watching her with an unreadable expression that made her cheeks warm. After supper, the men dispersed to the bunkhouse, while Helena helped Martha clear the table despite the older woman's protests. "You're not hired help," Martha scolded gently. "You're the school teacher." "I'd like to be useful," Helena insisted. "And truthfully, I enjoy the company." Martha's expression softened. "It's lonely for a young woman out here, I know, but you'll find your place. The children will adore you. They've been making do with lessons from whoever had the time and inclination, which wasn't often enough." "What about their parents?" Helena asked, carefully stacking plates. "Most are widows or widowers. Life is hard out here: illness, accidents." Martha shook her head. "Some of the older boys haven't had proper schooling in years. They're more interested in being cowboys than scholars." "I'll just have to make learning appealing then," Helena said with determination. Martha smiled. "That's the spirit. Now, get some rest. Griff will be waiting for you at first light. He's an early riser." Helena slept fitfully that night, her dreams filled with endless prairies and gray-eyed cowboys. Speaking of fate, she woke before dawn, dressing in her most practical skirt and blouse and pulling her hair back with a simple ribbon. The kitchen was already alive with activity when she entered. Martha was kneading dough while Griff sat at the table, nursing a cup of coffee. He stood when Helena appeared. "Good morning, Miss Tyler. Ready to see your schoolhouse?" "Very much so," Helena replied, accepting the cup of coffee Martha handed her. "Though I admit I'm a bit nervous about what I might find." "It's sound enough," Griff assured her. "Just needs a woman's touch." After a quick breakfast, they set out on foot. The morning air was crisp and clear, the vast Wyoming sky stretching endlessly above them. Helena found herself breathing deeply, savoring the clean scent of sage and pine. "It's beautiful here," she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. Griff nodded. "Different from Boston, I imagine." "In every possible way," Helena smiled. "But I find I don't miss the city as much as I expected." "What brought you all the way out here?" Griff asked, his stride shortening to match hers. "Most Eastern ladies aren't exactly eager to brave the frontier." Helena hesitated, unused to sharing personal details. "My father died last year. He was a professor at Harvard, but his illness consumed what little savings we had. When he passed, I found myself without means or prospects." She lifted her chin. "Teaching has always been my passion, so when I saw the advertisement for a position out west, it seemed like providence." Griff studied her with new respect. "Takes courage to travel so far alone." "Or desperation," Helena said with a small, self-deprecating laugh. "No," Griff disagreed firmly. "Plenty of desperate people never find the strength to change their circumstances. You did." They crested a small hill, and Helena gasped. Below them spread the main ranch complex, a large barn, multiple corrals filled with horses and cattle, bunkhouses, and various outbuildings. Men moved about with purpose, and the whole scene pulsed with life and activity. "Now that's more like what I expected," she said, delighted by the sight. Griff grinned. "Told you there was more to Rattlesnake Ranch than meets the eye." Beyond the main complex, nestled among a small grove of cottonwood trees, stood a simple one-room building with a bell tower. "Your schoolhouse," Griff announced, leading her down the hill. As they approached, Helena could see that while the structure was sound, it had clearly been neglected. The steps sagged, paint peeled from the clapboards, and dust coated the windows. "When was the last time classes were held here?" she asked, pushing open the creaking door. "About a year ago. The last teacher left rather suddenly after a disagreement with Mr. Holloway about curriculum." Griff followed her inside. She thought the children should focus exclusively on literature and history. He believed they needed practical knowledge, mathematics, agriculture, survival skills. Helena surveyed the interior rows of mismatched desks, a pot-bellied stove in the corner, and a chalkboard mounted on the wall behind a teacher's desk. Despite the dust and cobwebs, she could see the potential. "I believe children need both," she said thoughtfully. "Beauty and practicality go hand in hand. One feeds the soul, the other the body." Griff leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "That's exactly what I told Mr. Holloway when he was considering your application." Helena turned to him in surprise. "You had input in my hiring." A faint flush colored his tanned cheeks. "I may have put in a good word after reading your letters. You wrote about teaching with passion, not just as a job." "Thank you," Helena said, touched by his admission. "I won't let you down." "I never thought you would," Griff replied softly. They spent the morning cleaning the schoolhouse, sweeping floors, washing windows, and clearing away a year's worth of dust and neglect. Helena was pleasantly surprised to discover a small library cabinet filled with books, many in good condition. "The previous teachers contributed most of those," Griff explained, helping her sort through the volumes. "Some came from Mr. Holloway's personal collection." By midday, the schoolhouse was beginning to look habitable again. They sat on the front steps, sharing the lunch Martha had packed for them: cold chicken, bread, and apple slices. "Tell me about the children," Helena said between bites. "What should I expect?" Griff chuckled. "They're a spirited bunch. The Watson twins, Tommy and Timmy, are 8 and absolute hellions, smart as whips but full of mischief. Sarah Johnson is 12 and probably the best reader in the county. Her brother Caleb is 16 and thinks he's too grown for schooling, but he has a good head for numbers." As Griff described each child, Helena found herself increasingly eager to meet them. She was particularly intrigued by Griff's description of Mary Holloway, Mr. Holloway's 10-year-old granddaughter who lived on the ranch. "Her parents died in a fire 3 years back," Griff explained, his expression somber. "She hasn't spoken a word since. Mr. Holloway hopes you might be able to reach her." "Poor child," Helena murmured. "I'll certainly try my best." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a rider, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, his face flushed with exertion. "Griff," he called, dismounting in a hurry. "Got trouble at the north pasture. Rustlers hit during the night. Took about 30 head by Cooper's count." Griff was on his feet immediately, his relaxed demeanor replaced by alert authority. "Round up the men. I'll meet you there." He turned to Helena. "I'm sorry, but I need to go." "Of course," she said quickly. "Don't worry about me. I can find my way back." He hesitated. "It's not a short walk. I'll be fine," Helena assured him. "This is my home now. I should learn to navigate it." Something flickered in Griff's eyes at her words. "Your home," he repeated softly. "Yes, I suppose it is." He mounted the young man's horse with practiced ease. "Follow the main trail back. Don't wander off it, even if you think you see a shortcut." Helena watched him ride away, struck by how quickly he'd transformed from her friendly guide to the capable ranch foreman. It occurred to her that there was much more to Griff Xavier than she'd initially realized. The walk back to the main house gave Helena time to reflect on her first full day at Rattlesnake Ranch. Despite the unexpected beginning, she felt surprisingly at home. The vast landscape that had seemed so alien yesterday now filled her with a sense of freedom she'd never experienced in Boston's crowded streets. When she reached the main ranch complex, activity was minimal, most of the men apparently having joined the pursuit of the cattle rustlers. Helena made her way to the garden beside the main house, where she found Martha harvesting vegetables. "There you are," the older woman greeted her. "I heard about the trouble. Rustlers have been growing bolder these past months. Is it dangerous?" Helena asked, unable to keep the concern from her voice. Martha straightened, pressing a hand to her lower back. "Can be. Most rustlers run when confronted, but some stand and fight. Griff knows what he's doing, though. Been handling such matters for Mr. Holloway since he was barely more than a boy himself." "How long has he worked here?" Helena asked, helping Martha gather the vegetables into a basket. "Coming on 15 years now. Showed up when he was 16, half-starved and looking for work. Mr. Holloway saw something in him right away, put him to work with the horses." Martha smiled at the memory. "Boy had a way with them like nothing I'd ever seen. Worked his way up to foreman by the time he was 25. Helena absorbed this information, adding it to the picture she was forming of the enigmatic cowboy. "He seems very dedicated to the ranch. This place is his life," Martha agreed, then gave Helena a knowing look. "Though he might make room for other things if the right opportunity presented itself." Before Helena could respond to that rather pointed observation, a small figure appeared from behind the garden fence, a girl with solemn eyes and long blonde braids, watching Helena with undisguised curiosity. "Hello there," Helena said gently. "You must be Mary." The child didn't speak, but she didn't run away either. Martha nodded encouragingly. "Mary, this is Miss Tyler, the new teacher we told you about." Helena knelt to bring herself to the girl's level. "I'm very pleased to meet you, Mary. I was just helping Mrs. Wilson with the garden. Would you like to join us?" After a moment's hesitation, Mary stepped forward and carefully took a carrot from the basket, examining it with intense concentration before beginning to brush the dirt from its surface. "She loves the garden," Martha explained softly. "Spends hours out here when the weather permits." "Gardens are wonderful places," Helena agreed, addressing Mary directly even though the child didn't look up. "My mother kept a small garden in Boston. She taught me that plants are like people, they each need different things to thrive." Mary's hand stilled briefly, though she kept her eyes on the carrot. "Some need lots of sun, others prefer shade. Some need constant attention, while others do better when left alone to grow at their own pace." Helena reached for another carrot. "The trick is figuring out what each one needs." For the briefest moment, Mary's eyes flicked up to meet Helena's before returning to her task. It wasn't much, but Helena felt a small surge of hope. Connection took time, especially with a child who had experienced such trauma. The rest of the afternoon passed pleasantly, with Helena helping Martha prepare supper while Mary remained a silent but constant presence, observing Helena's every move with watchful eyes. By the time the ranch hands began returning, the sky was darkening to twilight. Helena waited anxiously for news, trying not to betray her concern as men filed into the dining room, dusty and tired. Relief washed over her when Griff appeared in the doorway, his clothing dirty and a small cut visible on his cheekbone, but otherwise unharmed. "Were you successful?" Mr. Holloway asked as Griff took his seat. "Recovered most of the cattle," Griff reported. Caught one of the rustlers, a young fellow named Dawson. Sheriff's holding him in town. His eyes met Helena's briefly. No serious injuries on our side. The meal was quieter than the previous evening, the men too exhausted for much conversation. Helena found herself watching Griff, noting the way he seemed alert despite his obvious fatigue, the way he thanked Martha for each dish with genuine appreciation, the gentleness with which he spoke to Mary when she appeared at his elbow with a damp cloth for his cut. After supper, when the men had dispersed and Martha was busy in the kitchen, Helena found Griff sitting alone on the porch steps, staring up at the emerging stars. "May I join you?" she asked hesitantly. He shifted to make room. "Of course." Helena settled beside him, careful to maintain a proper distance. "I wanted to thank you for showing me the schoolhouse today. I'm eager to begin lessons." "The children will start arriving tomorrow to meet you," Griff told her. "Word travels fast out here." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, the night air cool and fragrant with sage. "I met Mary today," Helena finally said. "She seems like a very intelligent child." Griff nodded. "She is. Before the fire she was always singing, talking, asking questions. Now," he sighed. "Mr. Holloway worries about her. We all do." "Trauma affects everyone differently," Helena said carefully. "Some wounds take longer to heal than others." "You sound like you speak from experience," Griff observed. Helena hesitated. "My mother died when I was 12. For almost a year afterward, I barely spoke to anyone. My father finally reached me through books we would read together every evening, and eventually, the words on the page led to words of my own again." Griff turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "You understand more than most, then." "I only know that healing can't be rushed," Helena replied. "But having people who care makes all the difference." Their eyes met in the silvery moonlight, and Helena felt a curious fluttering in her chest. Griff's gaze was intense yet gentle, as if he was seeing beyond her careful composure to the person beneath. "You're not what I expected, Helena Tyler," he said softly. "What did you expect?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A smile tugged at his lips. "Someone more conventional." Eastern ladies usually arrive with firm ideas about how things should be done, eager to bring civilization to us uncouth Westerners. Helena laughed. "I assure you, I have no such pretensions. If anything, I'm here to learn as much as to teach." "That," Griff said, "is exactly why you belong here." The days that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Helena spent mornings preparing the schoolhouse, afternoons meeting the children who would be her pupils, and evenings learning about ranch life from Martha, Mr. Holloway, and occasionally Griff, when his duties allowed. The schoolhouse was transformed with fresh paint, curtains made from fabric Martha found in the attic, and wildflowers that Mary silently brought each day, placing them in jars along the windowsills. The children, initially shy or skeptical, quickly warmed to Helena's genuine enthusiasm for learning. As promised, Caleb Johnson was resistant at first, arriving only because his father insisted. "I should be working, not sitting at a desk," he complained. "Education is work," Helena countered. "The most important kind." "How's reading going to help me run cattle?" the boy challenged. "How will you know if you're being cheated in business transactions without mathematics?" Helena returned. "How will you write contracts, read market reports, or correspond with buyers in other territories without literacy?" The boy had no ready answer for that, and Helena pressed her advantage. "You're intelligent, Caleb. I can see it clearly. Don't limit your future out of impatience with the present." Slowly, Caleb's resistance faded, especially when Helena discovered his fascination with maps and began incorporating geography and land surveying into her lessons. The Watson twins proved to be exactly as Griff had described them: bright, mischievous, and full of energy. Helena quickly learned that keeping them engaged with challenging material was the best way to prevent disruptions. Mary attended every day, sitting quietly at a desk near the window. Though she never spoke or raised her hand, Helena noticed that she completed all her written work with remarkable care and intelligence. Each day, Helena would spend a few minutes sitting beside Mary, sometimes reading to her, other times simply working quietly together. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after Helena's arrival, she was writing out the next day's lessons on the chalkboard when she heard the schoolhouse door open. "We're finished for today," she called without turning around. "Unless you'd like to help me clean the erasers." "I wouldn't mind," came Griff's deep voice. Helena spun around, nearly dropping her chalk. "Oh, I thought you were one of the children." Griff stood just inside the doorway, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "Sorry to interrupt. I was riding by and saw the light still on. I'm just preparing for tomorrow." Helena set down the chalk and brushed dust from her hands. "Did you need something?" He shifted his weight. "Actually, I wanted to ask if you might join me for a ride tomorrow afternoon after classes. There's a place I'd like to show you if you're interested." Helena felt a flutter of anticipation. "I'd like that very much." Griff's face brightened. "I'll have a horse saddled for you after the children leave." The next day, Helena found it difficult to concentrate on her lessons, her mind repeatedly wandering to the upcoming excursion. When the last child had finally departed, she quickly tidied the schoolhouse and changed into the riding skirt Martha had altered for her from one of Mr. Holloway's late wife's garments. Griff was waiting outside with 2 horses, his own chestnut gelding and a gentle-looking bay mare. "This is Daisy," he said, helping Helena mount. "She's steady and patient, good for a city girl who's still learning to ride." Helena adjusted her seat in the saddle. "I'll have you know I've been practicing. Martha says I'm a natural." Griff's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Martha would say that if you fell off every 2 minutes, just to be kind." He mounted his own horse with fluid grace. "Ready?" They rode away from the ranch, following a narrow trail that wound through rolling hills covered in sagebrush and wildflowers. Helena was struck once again by the raw beauty of Wyoming territory, so different from the manicured gardens and crowded streets of Boston. "Where are we going?" she asked as they crested a hill. "Somewhere special," Griff replied enigmatically. "You'll see." The trail gradually climbed, and Helena marveled at the changing landscape from open prairie to scattered pines, the air growing cooler as they ascended. After about an hour's ride, Griff led them through a dense copse of trees that suddenly opened into a hidden meadow. Helena gasped. Before them stretched a small valley, carpeted with wildflowers in every color imaginable, a clear stream winding through its center. Distant mountains formed a dramatic backdrop against the impossibly blue sky. "It's beautiful," she breathed, dismounting when Griff did. "I found this place my first year at the ranch," he said, securing the horses. "I come here when I need to think or just to remember that there's more to life than work and worry." "Thank you for sharing it with me," Helena said sincerely. They spread a blanket near the stream, and Griff produced a simple meal from his saddlebags: bread, cheese, dried fruit, and a canteen of cool water. As they ate, he asked about her classes, listening with genuine interest to her stories about the children's progress. "Mary wrote a complete sentence today," Helena shared proudly. "She hasn't spoken yet, but her written work is exceptional." "That's wonderful progress," Griff said. "Mr. Holloway will be pleased." "I believe she'll speak when she's ready," Helena added, "in her own time." Griff studied her thoughtfully. "You have a gift for understanding people, Helena, not just teaching facts, but seeing what they truly need. Helena felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. I try to pay attention. Every person is different like the plants in a garden. Is that how you see Rattlesnake Ranch, as a garden to tend? She considered the question seriously. Perhaps, though I think I'm as much a new seedling here as a gardener. Griff laughed, the sound rich and genuine. A poet as well as a teacher. Hardly, Helena protested, but she was smiling too. As the afternoon waned, they walked along the stream, gathering wildflowers and talking about everything and nothing, books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they'd harbored. Helena found herself revealing thoughts she'd never shared with anyone, and Griff listened with an attention that made her feel truly heard. I never planned to stay in Wyoming forever, he admitted as they made their way back to the horses. When I first came, I thought I'd work a few years, save money, then buy my own place somewhere, maybe Oregon. What changed? Helena asked. Rattlesnake Ranch became home, Griff said simply. Mr. Holloway became the father I never had. The people here became family. Family is precious, Helena agreed softly, especially when you've lost yours. Griff stopped walking, turning to face her. Helena, whatever he meant to say was interrupted by a sudden clap of thunder. They both looked up to see dark clouds gathering rapidly over the mountains. We need to go, Griff said urgently. Wyoming storms move fast, and this valley can flood quickly. They hurried back to the horses, mounting quickly as the first fat raindrops began to fall. By the time they reached the tree line, the rain was coming down in sheets, thunder booming overhead. Follow me closely, Griff called over the storm's roar. There's a line shack about 20 minutes from here. They rode at a careful trot, the terrain too treacherous for speed in the downpour. Helena was soaked through within minutes, her hands numb on the reins, but she kept Daisy steady behind Griff's mount. Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder that spooked both horses. Daisy reared, and despite Helena's efforts to stay seated, she found herself falling. She hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. Before she could recover, Griff was there, kneeling beside her in the mud. Are you hurt? He demanded, his face tight with concern. Helena took stock of herself. Just winded, she managed, and embarrassed. Relief washed over his features. Can you ride? She nodded, and he helped her back onto Daisy, who had calmed after her initial fright. Griff kept a lead rope on Helena's horse for the remainder of the journey, ensuring they wouldn't be separated again. The line shack appeared through the curtain of rain, a small, crude cabin used by cowboys during roundups, or when bad weather caught them far from the main ranch. Griff helped Helena dismount and led the horses to a lean-to shelter attached to the cabin side before ushering her inside. The interior was spare but dry: a small iron stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow cot in the corner, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. Griff immediately set about starting a fire in the stove while Helena stood dripping and shivering. You need to get out of those wet clothes, he said practically, opening a trunk and pulling out some spare clothing. These will be too big, but they're dry. He handed her a flannel shirt and a pair of trousers, then turned his back. I'll see to the horses while you change. When Griff returned, Helena had changed into the borrowed clothes. Her wet garments hung on a line she'd strung near the stove. She'd also found a comb and was attempting to bring order to her sodden hair, which had come completely undone from its pins. Griff stopped in the doorway, staring at her. Helena felt suddenly self-conscious in the oversized men's clothing, her hair loose around her shoulders. I must look a fright, she said, trying to lighten the moment. No, Griff said hoarsely, you look. He cleared his throat. The storm's getting worse. I think we're in for the night. The horses are settled. Helena nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at the realization they would be spending the night alone together in the tiny cabin. It was completely improper and completely unavoidable given the circumstances. Griff changed into dry clothes as well, then set about preparing a simple meal from the supplies stored in the cabin. They ate in companionable silence, listening to the storm rage outside. "What will people think?" Helena finally asked, "when we don't return to the ranch tonight?" Griff added wood to the stove. "They'll know we sought shelter. It's what anyone would do in this weather." He met her eyes. "Your reputation won't suffer, Helena. I'll make sure of it." "I trust you," she said simply, and realized she meant it completely. As night fell, the storm showed no sign of abating. Griff insisted Helena take the cot while he made a pallet on the floor. Despite her exhaustion, Helena found sleep elusive, acutely aware of Griff's presence just a few feet away. "Griff," she whispered into the darkness, "are you awake?" "Yes," came his immediate reply. "What were you going to say earlier?" Before the storm came, she heard him shift on his makeshift bed. "I was going to say that sometimes life takes unexpected turns. When I saw you standing there by the stagecoach, looking lost and determined all at once, something told me you were going to change things at Rattlesnake Ranch." "Change things how?" There was a long pause before he answered. "Make it feel more like home than it already did." Helena's heart beat faster at his words. "I felt lost that day," she admitted. "When you rode up and told me I was exactly where I was meant to be, that it was fate, I thought you were just being kind." "I meant every word," Griff said quietly. "From the moment I saw you, I knew you belonged here." The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had never happened. They rode back to the ranch side by side, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings and possibilities. Word of their overnight absence had indeed reached the ranch, but as Griff predicted, no one seemed scandalized by their taking shelter from the storm. Martha merely handed Helena a cup of hot tea and shooed her off to change before the children arrived for school. The days that followed were filled with meaningful glances and brief, seemingly accidental touches when they passed each other. Helena found herself watching for Griff, her heart quickening whenever he appeared, and often caught him looking at her with an intensity that made her blush. A month after Helena's arrival at Rattlesnake Ranch, the community held a social gathering to celebrate the end of spring roundup. Tables were set up outside the main house, lanterns strung between posts, and a small band of local musicians provided lively tunes that had children and adults alike dancing on a wooden platform constructed for the occasion. Helena wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton with white lace at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was arranged in a becoming style Martha had helped her create, with a few curls framing her face. When she emerged from the house, she immediately sought Griff among the crowd. She found him in conversation with Mr. Holloway, looking more handsome than ever in clean trousers, a white shirt, and a vest. He'd trimmed his beard and combed his hair, though a rebellious lock still curled over his forehead. When he caught sight of her, his entire face lit up. "Miss Tyler," Mr. Holloway greeted her, "the celebration is a success thanks to your organizational skills." "I merely helped Martha with the arrangements," Helena demurred. "Nonsense," the older man said jovially. "You've brought new life to this place in just a few weeks. The children are learning, Mary's writing again, and even the hands are minding their language and manners." He chuckled. "And I haven't seen this one so cleaned up since last year's harvest dance," he added, clapping Griff on the shoulder. Griff looked embarrassed but pleased. "Would you care to dance, Miss Tyler?" he asked, offering his arm. The musicians were playing a lively reel, and couples were already twirling across the platform. Helena placed her hand on Griff's arm. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Xavier." Griff proved to be an excellent dancer, guiding her through the steps with confident ease. Helena found herself laughing as they circled and spun, her previous worries about propriety forgotten in the joy of the moment. When the music changed to a slower waltz, Griff drew her closer, his hand warm at her waist. "You look beautiful tonight," he murmured, his eyes never leaving hers. "Thank you," Helena replied, suddenly shy. "You look quite handsome yourself." They danced in silence for a moment, the space between them charged with unspoken feelings. "Helena," Griff finally said, his voice low, "I need to tell you something." Before he could continue, a commotion at the edge of the gathering interrupted them. A rider was approaching at speed, his horse lathered and winded. The music faltered and stopped as people turned to see what was happening. The rider dismounted in a rush, stumbling toward Mr. Holloway. "Rustlers," he gasped. "Big group, headed for the east pasture. They've already shot 2 of our men." The celebration dissolved into urgent activity. Men rushed for horses and weapons, women gathered children, and Mr. Holloway began issuing rapid orders. Griff released Helena's hand reluctantly. "I have to go," he said, his expression torn. "I know," Helena replied, fighting back fear. "Be careful." He caught her hand, pressing it briefly to his lips before rushing to join the mounting men. Helena watched them ride away, her heart in her throat, the evening's joy replaced by cold dread. Martha appeared at her side, her face grave. "Come, child. We need to prepare. There may be injured men returning." The next few hours were a blur of activity as Helena helped Martha boil water, tear bandages, and prepare the main house for possible casualties. Several of the older boys had insisted on joining the men, and Helena found herself praying for their safety as much as for Griff's. It was nearly dawn when the first riders returned, bringing with them 3 injured men who were quickly attended to by Martha and the ranch's unofficial doctor, an old cowhand named Doc Miller who had once studied medicine. The wounds were serious but not life-threatening, and Helena felt a small measure of relief. More men returned as the sun rose, dirty and exhausted but mostly unharmed. Helena scanned each group for Griff, her anxiety growing with each passing hour. Mr. Holloway returned around mid-morning, his face grim. "The Rustlers have been dealt with," he reported. "Sheriff's got the survivors. We lost some cattle, but it could have been worse." "And our men?" Martha asked, voicing the question Helena couldn't bring herself to ask. "No deaths on our side, thank the Lord. Cooper took a bullet in the shoulder. Caleb Johnson got himself a nasty cut, but he'll have a fine scar to impress the girls." The old rancher's expression softened as he looked at Helena's worried face. "Griff and a few others are still rounding up scattered cattle. He's fine, Miss Tyler." Helena felt her knees weaken with relief. "Thank you for telling me." It was late afternoon when Griff finally returned, riding slowly into the ranch yard. Helena, who had been anxiously watching from the porch, rushed to meet him as he dismounted. He looked utterly exhausted, with a bruise darkening his jaw and a torn sleeve revealing a bandaged arm. "You're hurt," she said, reaching for him without thinking. "It's nothing," Griff assured her, catching her hands in his. "Just a scratch." Helena realized they were standing in full view of the ranch, her hands clasped in his, but found she didn't care. "I was so worried," she admitted, Griff's expression softened. "I promised I'd come back, didn't I?" "You made no such promise," Helena protested. "Then I'm making it now," he said solemnly. "I will always come back to you, Helena Tyler." Before she could respond, a small figure darted between them, Mary, her face streaked with tears, flinging herself at Griff with a sob. He knelt immediately, gathering the child into his arms. "It's all right, little one," he murmured. "Everything's all right now. You promised," Mary hiccuped, her voice rusty from disuse. You promised you wouldn't leave like Mama and Papa." Helena's hand flew to her mouth. Mary was speaking her first words in 3 years, directed at Griff in a moment of pure emotional need. Griff looked as stunned as Helena felt. "That's right, I did promise," he said carefully, his voice thick with emotion. "And here I am, just like I said I'd be." Mary buried her face in his shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs. "I was scared." "I know, sweetheart, I know." Griff held her close, his eyes meeting Helena's over the child's head, sharing the miraculous moment. That evening, after Mary had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from the emotional day, Helena found Griff sitting alone on the porch steps, much as he had been that night weeks ago. This time, she didn't hesitate to join him. "Doc Miller says your arm will heal cleanly," she said, settling beside him. "Told you it was just a scratch," Griff replied with a tired smile. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Mary's been talking non-stop to Mr. Holloway," Helena finally said. "It's as if a dam broke inside her." "Fear does strange things," Griff observed. "Sometimes it silences us, sometimes it forces us to speak." "What were you afraid of?" Helena asked softly. Griff turned to look at her, his eyes serious in the fading light. "Losing something I hadn't even properly found yet." Helena's breath caught. "And what was that? A future with you?" He took her hand gently. "I was going to ask you last night before we were interrupted. I know it's too soon, you've only been here a month, but I can't imagine Rattlesnake Ranch without you now. I can't imagine my life without you in it." Helena's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he must hear it. "What are you asking, Griff Xavier?" "I'm asking if you might consider staying, not just as the schoolteacher but as my wife, someday when you're ready." His voice was steady but vulnerable. "I love you, Helena. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you stood there in the dust, insisting you'd been sent to the wrong ranch." Tears pricked at Helena's eyes. "I'm not sure when it happened for me," she admitted. "But somewhere between your whisper about fate and that storm-swept night in the line shack, I realized my heart had found its home not just in this place but with you." Griff's face broke into a radiant smile. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," Helena confirmed, her own smile matching his. "Though perhaps we should have a proper courtship first, for propriety's sake." "Whatever you wish," Griff agreed, lifting her hand to his lips. "Though I should warn you, propriety is a flexible concept in Wyoming territory." Helena laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "So I'm discovering." In the soft light of a Wyoming evening, surrounded by the sounds of the ranch settling for the night, Griff Xavier leaned forward and kissed Helena Tyler for the first time, a gentle, reverent kiss that held the promise of all the tomorrows to come. 1 year later, Helena stood in the same schoolhouse where she had begun her western adventure, now decorated with wildflowers and ribbons. Mary Holloway, no longer silent but chattering happily, was helping her arrange her hair beneath a simple veil. "You look beautiful, Miss Helena," the girl declared. "Like a princess in the storybooks." "Thank you, Mary," Helena replied, smoothing the skirt of her wedding dress, a creation Martha had helped her sew from fine fabric, ordered all the way from Denver. Martha herself appeared in the doorway, beaming with maternal pride. "It's time, dear. Everyone's waiting, and that man of yours looks like he might wear a hole in the ground with his pacing." Helena took a deep breath, her heart full to bursting with happiness. In the year since her arrival at Rattlesnake Ranch, so much had changed. The school had flourished, with students from neighboring ranches joining her classes. Mary had blossomed into a talkative, confident child. And Helena herself had found not just a purpose, but a home and a family she'd never dared to dream of. When she stepped outside, The entire community was gathered: ranch hands, neighboring families, even the sheriff from town. At the end of the flower-strewn path stood Griff, his eyes fixed on her with such love that Helena felt it like a physical warmth enveloping her. Mr. Holloway offered his arm to escort her. "Ready, Miss Tyler?" he asked with a gentle smile. "Though I suppose I won't be calling you that much longer." "I've been ready since the day I arrived," Helena replied, taking his arm, "even if I didn't know it then." As she walked toward her future husband, Helena thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this place: a mistaken ranch name, a dusty arrival, and a gray-eyed cowboy who had whispered about destiny. Griff had been right that day, though neither of them could have imagined just how right. This wasn't the wrong ranch after all. This was exactly where she belonged.